Imagine a battle, a victory, and within that victory lies the seed of a future empire. The year is 1243, a bloody battlefield in eastern Anatolia. On that day, the Mongol Empire achieved a decisive victory that would change the balance of power across the region. Standing against them was the most powerful Turkish state in Anatolia, the Sultanate of Rum. And even that powerful state was brutally crushed. For the Mongols, this was not just another battle, but part of a much larger strategy. Their objective was clear: to establish complete control over West Asia, so that no Turkish power would ever again dare to challenge them. But history sometimes takes turns that no one can possibly imagine. Nearly 2 centuries later, in 1453, another Turkish power emerges onto the stage of history, the Ottoman Empire. And that empire would one day capture Constantinople, the pride of the Byzantine Empire, the heart of a civilization that had lasted 1,000 years. With that victory, the chapter of a millennium-old empire came to an end. Afterward, the Ottomans rose to become one of the most powerful empires in the world. Their banners spread across 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and vast regions of Africa, and their rule would last for more than 6 centuries. And here begins one of history's greatest paradoxes. Because in trying to destroy Turkish power in Anatolia, the Mongols unknowingly created the conditions for a new power to rise, a power that would later become the most powerful Turkish empire in history. But how? How does a military victory end up producing the exact opposite result? How does an act of destruction become the beginning of a new power? And the most important question, what does this story teach us? About the unexpected consequences of history, the ones no one can predict. To find the answers, we are about to begin a long journey through history. But first, a quick question. Where in the world are you watching this video from? And what time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments below. Honestly, I'm curious to see which time zones around the world this story is reaching. Now let's turn back the wheel of time to the moment when a single battle was about to slowly change the course of history. So let's turn the clock of history back once again. Let's return to the moment, 1243, when a single battle was about to reshape the future of an entire region. But to truly understand this story, we need to go much further back in time. The year 1071, about a century and a half before the Mongols arrived, that year witnessed one of history's pivotal battles, the Battle of Manzikert. In that battle, the Seljuk Turks defeated the powerful Byzantine Empire. This victory was more than just a military triumph. It was the moment the gates of Anatolia opened, the beginning of a new era. But calling it merely an invasion would be misleading, because it was the journey of an entire civilization. The Turkic peoples arriving from the vast steppes of Central Asia did not come with swords alone. They brought with them their culture, their beliefs, and their social structures, an entire way of life. In 1077, they established the Sultanate of Rum. The word Rum literally means Rome, because this region was once part of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire. Over time, this new Turkish state rapidly grew stronger. By the late 12th century and the early 13th century, the Sultanate of Rum reached its golden age. By then, it was not just a military power, it had become a vibrant center of knowledge, trade, and culture. The sultans built a vast network of caravanserais across Anatolia, roadside inns along trade routes where merchants from distant lands could stop. There they could rest before continuing their journeys. This network directly connected Central Asia with the Mediterranean. As a result, trade flourished rapidly, especially with merchants from the Italian city of Genoa. At the same time, several Anatolian cities became major centers of learning. In cities like Kayseri and Konya, scholars taught astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy. But the most fascinating aspect of the Sultanate of Rum was something else. Gradually, a unique Turco-Persian culture began to emerge here. The sultans adopted Persian-style names. The language of administration was Persian. Persian influence was visible in literature, art, and architecture. Why did this happen? Because the Turks quickly understood one crucial principle. If you wish to rule a land, you must first understand its civilization. Power alone cannot sustain rule. You must also learn from the civilization itself. And at that very moment, another power began to appear on the horizon of history. A force that would soon shake the entire world. In this way, the Sultanate of Rum gradually built a unique strength, an extraordinary fusion of Turkish military skill and refined Persian culture. But history often follows a familiar rule. No power remains unbreakable forever. Over time, the Sultanate of Rum found itself caught between pressures from two directions. In the west came the relentless attacks of the Crusaders, and on the eastern horizon, a new power was slowly rising, a force that would soon reshape the map of the world. The year was 1206. Genghis Khan finally united the scattered Mongol tribes. What followed was like the spread of a storm. Over the next 2 decades, Mongol armies advanced across Central Asia with incredible speed, as if no power on earth could stop them. Between 1219 and 1221, they destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the most powerful states in the Islamic world at the time. Bukhara, Samarkand, Merv. Once prosperous and populated, these cities were nearly erased by the Mongol invasions. Historians estimate that several million people died in these campaigns. Some say 2 million, others believe the number approached 15 million. This was not just the fall of an empire, it was a terrifying message. Stand against the Mongols, and your cities, your people, your civilization will disappear. By the early 1230s, the Mongols had conquered most of Persia. Soon their armies stood at the borders of the Sultanate of Rum. At first, the Sultans of Rum chose to avoid confrontation. In 1236, Sultan Al-Din Kaikubad accepted the reality. He acknowledged himself as a vassal ruler under the Mongols and promised to pay regular tribute. This was not surrender, but a strategic decision, because they knew that facing the Mongols in open battle was nearly impossible. But if they acknowledged Mongol authority, they could still maintain limited autonomy within their lands. For several years, this strategy actually worked. But history suddenly took another turn. In 1241, the great Khan Ogedei died. After his death, a succession crisis erupted within the Mongol Empire. The new Sultan of Rum, Khosrow II, saw this as an opportunity. He decided that tribute would no longer be paid. He believed the Mongols were too distracted by their internal crisis and would not be able to respond. But history would later prove this was one of the greatest miscalculations of the time, because soon a battle was about to begin, one that would not only destroy an army, but change the fate of an entire empire. Khosrow made a serious mistake. In fact, 2 major mistakes. The first mistake was believing that the Mongols had grown weaker because of internal problems. In reality, that wasn't true. Despite internal struggles, the Mongol war machine remained terrifyingly effective. The second mistake was misunderstanding the Mongol mindset. To the Mongols, if a vassal ruler rebelled and went unpunished, it became a dangerous example. If Rum escaped punishment, other subject states would soon follow the same path. For this reason, the Mongol commander Baiju sent a clear message. Sultan Khosrow was asked once again to submit to Mongol authority. But this time, the Sultan refused, and with that refusal, war became inevitable. Khosrow quickly assembled a massive army, nearly 80,000 soldiers. He formed alliances with the Empire of Trebizond, gained support from the Ayyubids of Aleppo, and even hired European Frankish mercenaries. On paper, it was a powerful coalition army. Baiju, on the other hand, had only 30,000 Mongol warriors, along with auxiliary forces from Georgia and Armenia. The two armies finally clashed at the mountain pass of Kursadar between Sivas and Erzincan. On the first day, it seemed as if fortune favored Rum. They outnumbered the Mongols by nearly 3-1, but numbers alone do not decide battles. Within the Rum army there was poor coordination and weak discipline. The Mongol troops, meanwhile, were forged through harsh training, like a perfectly tuned war machine. They used tactics they had practiced countless times. Toward the end of the day, the Mongols used their famous tactic, a feigned retreat. The soldiers of Rum believed the enemy was collapsing. They began chasing the retreating Mongols, and at that very moment, the Mongols suddenly turned back. The sky darkened under a storm of arrows. Within moments, panic spread through the Rum army. Fear spread through the army like wildfire. That very night, something unexpected happened. The entire Rum army abandoned their camp and fled. Sultan Khosrow himself fled as well. He feared that some of his own generals might defect to the Mongols. The next day, when Baiju saw the empty camp, he first suspected it might be a trap. Because of that suspicion, he waited another day. That hesitation cost him the chance to capture the Sultan. But by then, the outcome of the war had already been decided. The Mongols had won. After this defeat, the Sultanate of Rum never regained its former strength. Eventually, the vizier Muiz al-Din had to negotiate surrender terms with the Mongols, and the terms were extremely harsh. Every year, Rum had to pay 12 million silver coins, 500 rolls of silk, 500 camels, and 5,000 sheep. Altogether, it was worth nearly 400,000 gold dinars. Rum itself had to transport this enormous tribute all the way to distant Mongolia. A Mongol overseer was also appointed to supervise the region. Outwardly, the Sultan still sat on his throne, but real power rested in Mongol hands. In 1246, Khosrow died. After his death, a new wave of instability began. His three sons began fighting each other for the throne. Eventually, the once great kingdom split into three parts. And from this fragmentation, a new chapter in the history of Anatolia was about to begin. The Mongols actually encouraged this state of division because a weak and fragmented sultanate was far easier to control than a strong and united state. From 1243 to 1308, the Sultanate of Rum continued to exist in name only, but real power remained in Mongol hands. In 1256, all of Anatolia formally acknowledged the authority of Möngke Khan. After the death of Sultan Kilik Arslan in 1264, Rum was effectively ruled under a Mongol viceroy. The central state structure slowly began to weaken. Local rulers began exercising power on their own terms. As a result, small states, known as beyliks, began to appear across Anatolia. In 1308, the last sultan was killed. With that, the Sultanate of Rum officially came to an end. But there is an important point to understand here. This was not just a political change. It was a deep transformation of the entire social structure. Previously, Anatolia had a strong central authority, but now there was no one capable of uniting the region again. Dozens of small beyliks were competing with one another. There was no single law, and security was uncertain. Yet within this chaos, new opportunities began to emerge. In 1258, exactly 15 years after the Battle of Kosedah, a child was born in a small northwestern Anatolian village called Soğut. His name was Osman. His father, Ertuğrul, was the leader of a small Turkish tribe from the Kaya clan. The Sultanate of Rum had granted them pasture lands as a reward for military service. As Osman grew up, he inherited a small beylik. Its territory was smaller than half the size of modern Switzerland. But this beylik had one crucial geographical advantage. It was located in northwestern Anatolia, far from the direct interference of the Mongols in the east, yet very close to the weakening Byzantine Empire in the west. Think about it for a moment. When the Mongols destroyed the Sultanate of Rum, thousands of Turkish warriors, farmers, scholars, and Muslim religious leaders had to search for a new, safe refuge. They could not move east because the Mongols ruled there, and they could not remain in central Anatolia either. Central Anatolia was in complete chaos. Different beyliks were constantly clashing with one another. But in the west stood a small beylik, facing directly toward the Byzantine frontier. To the Muslim world, the Byzantines were known as the main rival of Islam. For the Ghazi warriors who saw fighting for Islam as a sacred duty, this region was the perfect battlefield. As a result, Osman's Beylik slowly became a center of attraction, not because it was the strongest, but because it stood exactly where new opportunities were greatest. Here were opportunities that could rarely be found elsewhere. The chance to fight, the chance to conquer new lands, and the chance to stay far from Mongol control. Soon, thousands of people began gathering there. Each of them brought their own unique skills. Warriors brought their battle experience, craftsmen brought new technologies and techniques, scholars brought knowledge, and religious leaders brought spiritual guidance. Osman may not have been an extraordinary military genius, but he possessed three very important qualities. First, patience. He did not rush into large battles. Instead, he advanced slowly, capturing one small Byzantine fortress after another. Second, organizational skill.
Our main force will cross the river here, while the Akunji divert their attention to the south.
He knew how to transform nomadic warriors into a disciplined army. He built an administrative system, introduced taxation, and established a judicial structure. Third, the ability to earn people's trust. He treated both Muslims and Christians with fairness. As the Byzantine Empire weakened, many Byzantine officials surrendered to Osman, and Osman accepted them generously. In 1299, Osman took a symbolic yet extremely important step. He declared that his rule would no longer be under the Sultanate of Rum, a sultanate that had by then become little more than a shadow of itself. He ordered that the Friday sermon in mosques would now be read in his name, not in the name of the Sultan of Rum or the Mongols. It was a clear political declaration. We are now an independent state. The year 1299 is generally considered the founding year of the Ottoman Empire, though at that time it was only a small beylik, so small that one could walk across it in just a few days. Yet at that moment, a seed had already been planted. A seed that would grow over the centuries into one of the most powerful empires in the world. Over the next 25 years, Osman nearly doubled his territory. In 1326, his son Orhan captured the important city of Bursa, a city located only about 150 kilometers from Constantinople. Bursa soon became the first capital of the Ottomans. From here, the Ottomans would expand their empire steadily for the next 127 years. Finally, in 1453, they conquered Constantinople and rose to become one of the most powerful empires in the world. But here an important question arises. How did the Mongols, one of history's most organized and strategic powers, unknowingly give rise to a force that they had originally intended to resist? The answer lies in four important reasons. First, the Mongols were extremely skilled at destroying existing power structures. They effectively shattered the Sultanate of Rum, but they did not create a strong or effective governing structure to replace it. Why? Because Anatolia was never a major priority for them. It was simply a frontier region at the edge of their vast empire. They were mostly satisfied with collecting tribute, and they wanted to maintain a political situation where no single power could grow too strong. But within this power vacuum, small beyliks began emerging across Anatolia, and among them, one gradually grew stronger because of its strategic geographical position and eventually evolved into the Ottoman Empire. Second, when the Mongols devastated vast regions of Central Asia and Persia, millions of people fled westward. These were not ordinary refugees. Among them were experienced warriors, skilled craftsmen, educated scholars, and administrators who had once served in great royal courts. They did not bring only their personal talents, they also brought knowledge of how to organize a state, how to manage an army, and how to run an administration effectively. These priceless experiences. Osman and his successors learned a great deal from these people. The Ottomans did not invent everything from scratch. They learned from earlier empires, even from the Mongols themselves. If the Byzantine Empire had remained strong, the rise of the Ottomans might never have happened. But in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Crusaders sacked Constantinople and left the city terribly weakened. Civil wars, economic crises, and the steady loss of territory followed. As a result, the Byzantine Empire no longer had the strength to effectively stop the Ottoman rise. The Ottomans built their identity around the idea of the Ghazi warriors, warriors who believed fighting for Islam was a sacred duty. This was not merely propaganda, it was a powerful motivation that attracted fighters from across the Islamic world. While many other Anatolian beyliks were busy fighting among themselves, the Ottomans focused their attention westward, expanding into Byzantine lands. This created a clear objective around them, a shared purpose that everyone could unite behind. From a historical perspective, this is an extraordinary example of systems thinking. The Mongols focused on their short-term objective, destroying the Sultanate of Rum and removing a potential threat. They indeed achieved this goal successfully, but they did not think much about the long-term consequences. By creating a power vacuum, pushing thousands of skilled people westward, and failing to establish a stable governing structure, they unknowingly created an environment where a new power could emerge, and that power, the Ottoman Empire, eventually became far more powerful than the Sultanate of Rum, which the Mongols had once destroyed. So what lesson does this story teach us nearly 780 years later? In complex systems, and history itself is an extremely complex system. No event ever happens in isolation. Every decision carries consequences, and many of those consequences are nearly impossible to predict in advance. History reminds us again and again that even a small decision today may change the entire world in the future. The Mongols were one of the most intelligent empires in history.
The river crossing is vulnerable. Move the cavalry across by sunrise.
Their organization was remarkable, and their intelligence network was highly effective, and they were skilled at long-term strategic planning. Yet even they could not predict that destroying the Sultanate of Rum would one day pave the way for the rise of the Ottomans. This does not mean that we should take no action at all. Rather, it means we should remain humble about our ability to predict the future and always be prepared for unexpected consequences, because when you destroy a structure of power, you do not only create a vacuum, you also create opportunities for new powers to emerge. So the real question is not simply whether destruction is justified, the real question is, who will fill the vacuum afterward? If there is no clear answer to the second question, then it is wiser to be cautious before making the first decision. The Mongols destroyed the Sultanate of Rum, but they did not build a strong alternative structure in its place. The result was the emergence of countless small beyliks across Anatolia, and among them, one gradually grew stronger, which later became the Ottoman Empire. Osman may not have been the most talented ruler in Anatolia. His beylik was neither the richest nor the most powerful, but he was in the right place at the right time. Yet this does not diminish Osman's achievement, because success requires not only talent, but also a measure of luck. But this story reminds us of another important truth. Context matters enormously. The true meaning of our decisions is shaped by the specific circumstances in which we live. Osman was able to seize the opportunity because he deeply understood his context. He understood that his geographical position was a major advantage. He realized that many people were moving westward in search of refuge. He recognized that the Byzantine Empire was steadily weakening. History is filled with examples of such paradoxical events. Sometimes actions taken with good intentions can lead to unexpected disasters, and sometimes, from those disasters, new opportunities are born. History offers many such examples. Some of the most powerful empires began from the humblest of beginnings. In 1243, the Battle of Kosadar was a decisive victory for the Mongols. But about 210 years later, the descendants of those they once defeated conquered Constantinople. And thus an empire was established, one that would last for nearly 600 more years. This story teaches us an important lesson: humility, because we can never truly know what the long-term consequences of our actions may be. what appears to be victory today may actually be planting the seeds of future defeat. And what seems like defeat today may be creating the path for future success. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson. Act with caution, always be ready to adapt, and never assume you understand all the consequences of your decisions. In this video, we explored together one of history's greatest paradoxes, how the Mongols, in trying to destroy Turkic power, unintentionally created the path for the rise of the most powerful Turkic empire in history. Now I want to ask you a question. Have you ever experienced something similar in your own life, where an action led to the opposite result of what you expected? Perhaps a decision that seemed right at the time but later caused problems, or perhaps a failure that later opened the door to new opportunities. Share your story in the comments below, because personal stories about unintended consequences often teach us more than books. If this video helped you see history and life from a new perspective, please leave a like and subscribe to support the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss more historical stories in the future. Because these are not just stories about the past, they help us understand the present and imagine the future in new ways.